Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Kiravanachari Yamuna Kiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Iskon Gurvind ki, Sri Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Gaur Premanande. Well, first of all, it's on the Vaishnav calendar again today. Julan Yatra. Okay, so this Ekadashi is called Pavitropana Ekadashi. So this is an excerpt from a morning walk, 11th of February 1976 in Mayapur, discussion between Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna, we should always chant 25 rounds on Ekadashi if initiated. Srila Prabhupada initiated everyone. Why initiated? So that should be standard for our movement on Ekadashi day. Standard is 16, but if one can chant more, then he is welcome. Tamal Krishna is not mandatory for Ekadashi. Jai Patak recommended. Srila Prabhupada, no, Ekadashi means that, fasting and chanting. Tamal Krishna, sometimes I'm wondering because our men have to go on book distribution. No, that is preaching work. For that purpose, you can stop this, but generally, one who has no preaching work, he can chant. Srila Prabhupada ki. Radha Govinda Julan Yatra. This is the swing festival of Radha Krishna. The deities ride on an elaborately decorated swing. Shri Radha Govinda ki. Thank you. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. I have done my part. So this is the 6th volume of this Lilamrita. The word was sent to all GBC secretaries worldwide. Srila Prabhupada might depart very soon, and he wanted to be with them in Vrindavan. As soon as possible, the GBC men left their duties and came to him. The last time most of them had been with him was in February during the annual meeting in Mayapur. Tamal Krishna informed them of Srila Prabhupada's recent turns, how he had been preaching in Bombay but not eating, how he had gone to Rishikesh and gotten worse, and how he had come to Vrindavan, sensing that the end was soon. Tamal Krishna had explained that Srila Prabhupada had asked that he simply be administered the medicine of the holy name continually, that the GBC and sannyasis be gathered to chant with him, and that a will be made securing ISKCON's properties and ensuring the continuation of the ISKCON institution. Tamal Krishna also mentioned that Prabhupada had said that their love for him would be shown by their cooperation in keeping ISKCON together after his departure. Tamal Krishna Goswami confided to his godbrothers that his own feelings were mixed. It was a time of sorrow, and yet Srila Prabhupada seemed relieved now that he had decided not to struggle to survive. Tamal Krishna said he couldn't but feel happy at Srila Prabhupada's relief from all concerns. Bhavananda Goswami, one of the first GBC men to arrive, told the others how he had said to Prabhupada that on one hand he felt sad that Srila Prabhupada was departing, but also joyful that he would be able to leave this nasty material world and rejoin Krishna. Prabhupada had approved the sentiment, adding that although his Guru Maharaj had become disgusted at the end of his life due to the misbehavior of his leading disciples, he did not feel that. Rather, he liked the company of his disciples and felt they were doing their best in carrying out his order. But he also warned them not to spoil ISKCON and become another Gaudiya Mat by splitting up. The ISKCON leaders formed small groups and took turns in being with Srila Prabhupada and chanting and reading to him. He would often be sitting up in bed in his main room downstairs in the high-ceilinged room with its black stone floor, which would be very dimly lit, though decorated with flowers and framed pictures of ISKCON deities. His room was comfortable despite the oppressive heat because of the air cooler and overhead fans. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 14, entitled The Forest of Enjoyment, Text 37. Evam vita vyati sangha vivreda vairanu bandopi purvavashanaya mita udavatia atapavahati. Translation: although people may be enemies, in order to fulfill their desires again and again, they sometimes get married. Unfortunately, these marriages do not last very long, and the people involved are separated again by divorce or other means. Please repeat. Although people may be enemies, in order to fulfill their desires again and again, they sometimes get married. Unfortunately, these marriages do not last very long, and the people involved are separated again by divorce or other means. Srila Prabhupada's report, as stated previously, every conditioned soul has the propensity to cheat, even in marriage. Everywhere in this material world, one conditioned soul is envious of another. For the time being, people may remain friends, but eventually they become enemies again and fight over money. Sometimes they marry and then separate by divorce or other means. On the whole, unity is never permanent. Due to the cheating propensity, both parties always remain envious. Even in Krishna consciousness, separation and enmity take place due to the prominence of material propensities. Om Agyanatamanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakrunmalitamina Tasmashi Gurave Namaha Am Garoti Vachalam Pangamalagate Grimya Kripatamam Vande Shigrim Dintaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhanitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Although people may be enemies, in order to fulfill their desires again and again, they sometimes get married. Unfortunately, those marriages do not last very long, and the people involved are separated again by divorce or other means. So the material world is all about compromise. Even, in the high-class families, royal families, etc. Sometimes people are forced to marry somebody else for the sake of annexing the kingdom or keeping good relations or keeping a certain amount of royal blood or high class there. And it may well be, even in our own royal family, we see that Prince Charles, his true love was somebody else, yet somehow or another it was arranged that he had to marry somebody else. Sometimes, we think that rich and powerful people have got more freedom, but there's an example of someone who seems to be one of the most prominent persons in the country or in the world, but still he didn't have his own freedom. There had to be some kind of arrangement there for this to happen. And in poor families also, sometimes the arranged marriages are there almost like a business deal sometimes. Because one family may have a son and they may not be very wealthy, but because they've got a son, then they can leverage and they can levy a dowry out of another poor family and put them in some difficulty. So this is going on. It's abusing the system there for personal gains. Or sometimes people are getting married simply because they think this is... So people have a kind of inherent idea of what they think is success or beauty, etc. And then based on how they gauge themselves, 1 to 10, then they'll look and see, is this person, am I punching above my weight? Is this person someone that I could aspire to marry? And then perhaps say the guy is not too pretty, but he's got a load of money. And then he might get himself a pretty wife, or vice versa. These things go on. But then if the money dries up, then perhaps you'll be interested in somebody else. And sometimes this happens also if someone's more successful than the husband or the wife, then they split up and they go for someone else. Or they get married for some superficial attraction, and when the heat of that superficial attraction has died down, in the cold grey light of day, they realise that this person's not really what I thought they were. Because in our mind, in our heart and mind, we have an idea of what we want our life to be, how we want people to reciprocate, what we think love is. And when people don't supply these various needs, whether it be some sentimental, emotional, financial, or other needs, then they may look elsewhere. Or sometimes, even though they hate each other, they'll still stay together, sometimes for the good of the family, or sometimes because they just don't know anything else. And then they just simply become captives of each other. They've got themselves living in their own prison. So there's many examples where one could think of where this would take place, which is that marriages do not last long. So even if they do continue, then sometimes they're very unhappy and they just remain in that unhappy situation for the sake of the kids. They say that quite often. And then the kids have to witness so much bad behavior going on, bad examples. Whereas in Krishna consciousness, when Krishna is in the center, then it takes that envy aspect out of things. Say some guy is earning a certain amount per month, and then his wife gets a good job and she's earning more, then he may feel like emasculated, he may feel less, he may get depressed on that. It may start to affect the relationship. Or if the husband's making the money and the wife's spending all the money, so many different scenarios where rather than being in a happy situation, they become envious of each other. I'm working all day and she's just spending it. Or maybe nowadays, if you're a house husband, then the wife might be working all day and he's just lying around watching television, playing video games, living in an imaginary world. So they become envious of each other rather than everybody performing their duty, pulling their weight. So we should be careful in Krishna consciousness that we always pull our weight, we always do our duty, we don't create envy amongst others. typically a devotee is happy in their own service, but when they see others not engaging properly, then it may be envious, thinking, oh, this person's not having to do much, but they're getting all the same facilities as everybody else. So we should try to avoid envy of others. Everyone should do their duty. And if Krishna is in the center and we engage in Krishna conscious program from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we should always be endeavoring to engage our mind in Krishna consciousness through hearing, chanting, serving, remembering, serving the deity, so many different things we can be doing. Then it means that even our sleep is Krishna conscious, because the only reason we sleep is because we need to rest the body so we can get up and continue with our Krishna consciousness the next day. So in this way we can be 24 hours Krishna conscious. Srila Prabhupada said that sleep is like death to a devotee. So death means mode of ignorance. If we're, I remember when I was in the Bhakta program, there was one Bhakta Jake. He was a real Tamas Gun devotee. Before he joined, he would typically sleep 12 hours every day. So when he came to the temple, he was heavily conditioned by that, to the point where he would fall asleep everywhere. He couldn't subsist on 6 hours a day. So we'd be he'd be falling asleep in japa. And then we'd be sitting at the back to classes. We used to sit cross-legged with these little short tables. And then you'd hear this thud, and it was his head hitting the desk. And even in class, in Bhagavatam class, he went whoosh, timber, crashed down and fell on top of a load of devotees. So it came to the point where they realised they actually had to give him more sleep. He physically couldn't manage, no matter how hard he tried. But he was so fired up, when it came time to go to sleep, he'd be like this, and then he'd dive into his sleeping bag. And I remember once he even got back out, it was so relishable, he got back out and did it again. He was a bit of a joker. But yeah, we shouldn't be so fired up about getting into Tamas Gun that we get excited and can't even sleep. We get into the mode of passion about our devotion to the mode of ignorance. Mode of ignorance means staying awake at night time when we should be sleeping during the daytime when we should be up serving. So there's different times of the day where modes of ignorance, passion and goodness are prominent. And the times for the mode of goodness, which are prominent, is the Brahma Muhurta, simply shortly before dawn and up to like 8 o'clock or something like that, where until the mode of passion starts to go, maybe even 9 o'clock. We used to find when we were on book distribution, if you get an early start, then you could catch people when they were not quite into the mode of passion yet, and it was sometimes a bit better. I mean, if you start Sankirtan, you start your book distribution on the street at 12 o'clock, then it was just a stampede. They were already fired up into the mode of passion. So sometimes we used to dilly-dally, so we didn't have to start on time, but you paid for it because you couldn't get started because it was so passionate. So I remember coming to the conclusion that I thought, better to go on the street as soon as we can, because then as the modes start to change, then you can pick up your pace with it. So we can engage these different modes in Krishna's service. If the mode of passion is prominent at a certain time during the day, we can use that to do something industrious for Krishna consciousness movement. We can use passionate endeavour, but not so much passionate in the sense that we don't think. There's a simple definition of the modes is mode of goodness means that we think first and then we act. So we're considerate about what we're doing. We know what we're doing. We know why we're doing it. It's done with due care and attention. Mode of passion means act first and then maybe think, or just don't think, just act. And mode of ignorance means don't think, don't act. So we see that nowadays people had the chance, they would just not work. They would be quite happy to have no duty and not have any responsibility. Have to think and just enjoy their senses, that's all. The fact is, you can only enjoy the senses so much, and then the senses become dull. People are experiencing that with this coronavirus. People are experiencing the loss of sense of taste and smell, which is something they're not used to doing. They're not used to any such austerities. They're used to just catering to the senses demands. Anytime the senses desire something, then they just make a plan to get it. They think it's them. So we shouldn't be like that we misidentify our senses, our mind with ourselves. Understanding this verse, Vachavegam Manasakrodavegam Jiva Vegamadar Pakstavegam Tan Vegan Yasho Vaheti Vishahetadira Shishashteham Sharimam Tvam Prapanam. So this Vachavegam Manasakrodavegam means that we should control the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. And such a person is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So therefore, for devotees who are doing this, they're chanting 16 rounds a day. They're following 4 regulative principles. Prabhupada says this means guru. So we may not be initiating guru, but we are actually in the standard where we can instruct people in Krishna consciousness. We're practicing the required standard of Krishna consciousness as given by Guru Parampara. So therefore we are representing this line. So the more we absorb in Krishna consciousness and the more we get out of it, the more steady we become, then the more service we can be to the fallen conditioned souls. Because so many people here are entangled in bad relationships. Their relationships are based on some kind of mutual sense gratification, mutual exploitation. And as a result, then invariably there's going to be some problems. And even if they have managed to work out some kind of deal where they just keep each other happy all the time by certain parameters of behavior or whatever, then should it not be something more than just a business deal? It's like some business partners, they don't fall out because they have the parameters where they have do's and don'ts, so that they safeguard the business from not collapsing due to partners falling out with each other. It doesn't mean to say that they are completely in agreement, but they know certain things are not worth disagreeing with because it will create further problems. So devotees, when we put Krishna in the center, even if we disagree about some things, that disagreement may be on how to understand some Krishna conscious verse or how to serve better. Prabhupada gives the example that the children are serving the father when he comes home from work. One goes to get his slippers, one goes to get the pipe, and then they're arguing which one's best. But the father, he accepts both with equal enthusiasm. So one person may be saying, gardening's the best service. Another one may be saying, pujari's the best service. Another one saying, sanktan's the best service. But the best service is the one which you're actually authorized to do. That's the best service for you. If the spiritual master says, I want you to cook for the deities, and you say, but I want to go in Sankirtan, that's the highest service. No, the highest service is your prescribed duty. That's what will satisfy you, because the spiritual master or his representatives are engaging us according to what we need to do and also what may need to be done at the time. Therefore, Prabhupada, as we're reading in the Lilamrita, Tamakrishna Maharaj was saying that Srila Prabhupada wanted the devotees to show their love for him by how we cooperate. Cooperating means that we don't just do our own thing, as they say, acting independently. There's a verse where there's the quote from Srila Prabhupada where he talks about devotees becoming independently thoughtful. So what's the difference between being independently thoughtful and being independent? Can anyone give me an answer on that one? What's the difference between being independently thoughtful and being independent? Is that not the same thing? Some people may be doing whatever they want and then they say, well, Prabhupada said we should be independently thoughtful.
An example of And in the 70s, devotees were pushing, like Krishna Swami and others, pushing book distribution. And Prabhupada at the same time was very grading, reminding devotees that they need to read books at the same time, about pushing the books. So some of the leaders, they were pushing distribution and not giving time for people to read. So the outcome of it actually was one of the devotees were saying that a lot of devotees who did neglect the reading and they just blindly followed what was said, a lot of them actually left Krishna consciousness movement. And some devotees were hiding and reading in the cars on the distribution, and they stayed in the movement because they took up Prabhupada's instruction to read books. So I think that's one of the examples of being independently thoughtful.
Okay, that's a good example. What would be an example of what is not independently thoughtful? Or what is just independent?
Random thing, somebody asks you to do one thing and you go to do something else.
Yeah. So for the two examples there, the independently thoughtful was that Prabhupada didn't encourage blind following. So therefore the devotees, he wanted them to read his books, not just distribute the books. And because some of them weren't reading them, and then this was kind of somewhat blind following. Whereas they should have taken into account that Prabhupada also wanted them to read the books, and this is essential for their own spiritual nourishment. The purpose of distributing books is to nourish or connect to fallen souls. Then we shouldn't prematurely think we're already connected, we don't need to read them. And we stay connected by reading them, just like the iron stays red hot by remaining in the fire. And we see how important these books are. So that's an example. And another example of independently thoughtful may be that someone gives you a service to do, and then rather than getting caught up in the detail of telling them how to do it, they say, just depend on Krishna, figure it out. So if your motivation is to to please and to serve, then we do our best to do that service. But at the same time, if someone comes along and says, okay, this was good, but that was wrong, and this wasted money or time or whatever, then we should be humble enough to say, okay, so I'll try to do it better by adopting this in the future. We accept that somebody else may have more experience or somebody else may know better. Not that just, okay, I've been given the freedom to do it as I wish, so nobody can then reprimand me about it or no one can correct me about it. So that is just, once again, manifesting the independence and pride. Simple, if someone's... another example of independent would be that we do something which is unauthorized. It may even appear to be something which needs to be done, but if it's unauthorized and we've been asked to do something else, it may be that someone else whose duty it is to organize things has got somebody else in mind for doing that, and then you've taken their service away, so they won't be engaged, and then you haven't been engaged, so this hasn't been done. So it ends up, it may even be that sometimes we're better at doing something than somebody else, but the devotees who have to manage things, they have to sometimes consider, well, this person may be better at doing it, but this person needs to do it. And it's not always that we're engaged according to our best material propensity. Sometimes even the spiritual master or other devotees would engage somebody not according to the material propensity. Because if sometimes we have a material propensity, we can do something easily and we can become proud. It doesn't really require much endeavor. And therefore our Krishna consciousness may actually suffer because we're not having to make any effort. Not that we always have to find the most difficult thing to do, which we have no skill for. So that's why it's always Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is emphasizing prescribed duty. By performing prescribed duty, this is how we make advancement. The devotees there were saying to Prabhupada 25 rounds, and Prabhupada says, no, if they're preaching, that's fine. 16 is the standard. So they were trying to make some standard of Ekadashi. Everyone should chant 25 rounds. But Prabhupada knows what's at stake. And if the devotees are not at that stage, or the movement requires them to do other preaching activities which are more important, then they should stick to the standard. Srila Prabhupada, he gave the priorities, and therefore we should focus in on what are these priorities. And when we put Krishna in the center, Srila Prabhupada says that sometimes there may be disagreement between devotees, so this may also be there in married life for those who are in the Grihastha ashram. There may even be disagreement, but there should never be dissension. The disagreement can always be sorted out if Krishna is put in the center, if the words of the spiritual master are put in the center. The only reason it can't be sorted out if there's some aspect of Maya in there which someone's not willing to let go. So this is the kind of essence of the resolving differences. If we just think, okay, well, I remember one time I was sent traveling with some devotees who were knowing to be like chalk and cheese. Everybody knows that expression, chalk and cheese. It means two opposites. Chalk is not cheese and cheese is not chalk. They can't do the same thing. They're just two opposite natures. And basically I was taken aside and told that, you have to referee these devotees. Now, they're both amazing devotees in their own right, but their material nature was very much different from each other. Their upbringing was very different from each other. And on occasion, sometimes there'd be some very heated arguments or some tense moments. And I was instructed, and it worked, that rather than blame, because when things escalate to a point where they just want to blame each other for it getting so bad, then the best thing to do is remove the blame thing from it altogether, that nobody's to blame, that this is Maya's just trying to get in the way of the Sankirtan movement, so let's just leave it and go on with the service. And then they were happy just to actually not accept the blame, which the other was given, and part of the deal is not to give the blame as well. We just blame Maya. So Maya's a third party. So of course, if you're a complete nonsense and someone come out and says, "Haribol Prabhu, what are you doing?" You say, "Oh, it's just Maya, it's not my fault." So we can't use it like that. It is Maya, but we accepted the Maya. That's our fault. That is our freedom, the minute independence, that we can accept Krishna or accept Maya, and we are accountable for that. We cannot avoid this accountability. But what we can do is we can purify ourselves from our past mistakes, or even our current mistakes, but not that we intentionally do them and just say, "Oops, sorry, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare," and I'm planning to be sorry again tomorrow. So we shouldn't be doing like that. We have to be sincere, which means we're trying to be a devotee, trying to absorb the character and the qualities of these great saintly devotees who are in our disciplic succession. And they're there as acharyas to set the standard of example, which means we aspire to be like that. So everybody's looking for some role models. They'll look for role models in the material world in terms of someone who's very famous, wealthy, powerful, strong, clever, beautiful, cool, whatever. So cool usually means they're renounced, they don't bother, nothing bothers them. Even in the midst of so much trouble, they can just remain calm. So everyone thinks, and this is Krishna, he's the most cool. Even before the Kurukshetra, there's huge armies just about ready to fight, And Krishna is just totally not fazed by it because he knows they're all destined to die anyway. Because this is fate has brought everyone together here for this purpose. And being the supreme controller, there's nothing unknown to him. But no one can be as cool as Krishna. Even when so many demons were sent to kill Krishna, he was never bothered. And his devotees also, just like when Agashura came onto the scene in Vrindavan, the cowherd boys going, oh, what's this great big cave-looking thing? It appears to be like a giant serpent with its mouth open, ready to swallow us all. And so they well, let's go and investigate this. And they were saying, even if it kills us, it can't kill Krishna. So they weren't even bothered. And then they were saying, and Krishna will save us like he did with so many other demons. So they had no fear. So sometimes people, they try to be cool, but if you're fearful, and everyone in the material world is fearful, vitaraga bhaya-krodha, unless you're free from attachment, fear, and anger by being fully absorbed in Krishna, then you're fearful. Unless, like we're reading in the Namamrita, that a devotee is not fearful at the time of death, because they take shelter in the holy name. So if we're afraid of death, it means that we haven't yet found the shelter of the holy name to the extent which we need to be. So we need to be working on that. And it's natural, Prabhupada was also saying that it's natural to be afraid at the time of death. But so for those who appear to be very renounced and being like cool characters, at the time of death they're not so cool because they're bewildered spirit souls. Therefore, the importance of the spiritual master is just like Kapanya dosho pahata swabhava prachamitvam dharma samudha chaitaya shreshan shreshan shishastaham sham tam papanam. Anyway, it's been a while since I quoted that one. So the translation is basically, now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure due to managerial weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now my soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. So we're confused about our duty. We don't know what we should be doing with our life. And we come to Krishna consciousness and we start to get a hint of that. But still, to some degree, we're holding on to Maya, so we're still somewhat confused, somewhat bewildered. But as we remain in the process of Krishna consciousness, then our intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, becomes more and more awakened by the process of hearing. And by engaging in devotional service, we get the opportunity to learn Trinadapi throughout the day. So in the morning we're chanting, please engage me in your devotional service. And we get an opportunity to hear Krishna's name, to get purified by Gunarupa Namnam, the Lord's qualities, form and name are all purifying. They're all one and the same. It's not that chanting his name is different from seeing the Lord. So by engaging we're asking for service. By engaging in the service, we get the opportunity to work with other devotees and learn to tolerate. So this is also there in the Trinadapi verse. We have to learn to tolerate. Chanting the holy name, a humble state of mind, more tolerant than the tree. And the humble state of mind is there because sometimes we're asked to do things we don't want to do, or we don't get to do things we want to do. So we have to curb our mind from just snapping back. Or sometimes you're having to serve with another devotee and there's some kind of conflict of material natures. So this is the opportunity to rise above that and see beyond that person's material nature and see that this person also has chosen to come to serve Krishna. This person has also chosen to serve the Lord through chanting. This person is also doing some devotional service. Whatever their standard or level is, it's still devotional service. It's not for us to think that whatever standard I do is enough. Just be happy with it, that's all you're getting. It's not that Krishna or other devotees owe you something because you've done service, but actually it's a great privilege. Just like every day we do Tulsi Arti and we're praying for the privilege of devotional service. It's a verse. Huh? The verse in the Tulsi Puja, which refers to the privilege of devotional service. It's in the translation. What? Yeah, so it's, I can't remember. Yeah, the privilege of devotional service. Adhikar, that word adhikar is interesting also because it means qualification or one's standing in devotional service. So it's a privilege to be serving Krishna. We shouldn't take it for granted, and we shouldn't think that Krishna owes us something. When we engage in devotional service, it means we're making an attempt to trying to do something for the Supreme Lord and the Lord's devotees without looking for anything in return. That's devotional service. But in our heart, if we're still harboring some fruit of things like, I've done this, I've done that, why am I being spoken to like this? Why am I being treated like that? Why am I not being recognized? We're still looking for something. So we have to actually learn that art of doing something without looking for something in return. Everybody, now that is such a great wealth. Everybody's looking for something that they can get out of what they're doing. This work reward system. It may even be that we speak to somebody and because we've spoken to them, we expect a certain reaction out of them. And because they don't give that reaction, we get upset. It's like, well, I've given my time and thought to you, so now you have to obey. You have to comply. So this fruit of thing, this fruit of mentality comes out in so many ways. And sometimes it can be years later. Sometimes that happens is that someone's performing apparent devotional service for years and then all of a sudden they start looking for something out of it, which means they've been harboring, they've been doing it, for something else. Whereas we know that we're giving up material security, just like the gopis of Vrindavan. This is why the Sankirtan movement is so advanced, it's so auspicious. It's in the mood of the highest servants of the Lord, where they give up everything and take to the Lord's whatever the Lord wants. This is back to yoga. So just like the gopis of Vrindavan, they were ready to give up all sorts of social stigma. They were quite happy to be stigmatized if it meant that Krishna was happy. Also, one time Krishna had a headache, and actually there was a painting of someone had to do this painting, and they showed it to Prabhupada, and it was Krishna looking morose, holding his head in his hands, and Prabhupada said, Krishna may have a headache, but he doesn't look like that. He doesn't look morose. So when Krishna has a headache, it's a pastime. It's not like, oh, my head's aching, So there's some other force upon him that he can't control. No, it's not like that. So everything in Krishna consciousness is ecstatic. So he did this, so he had a headache as part of the pastime, because then the devotees say to him, well, what can we get for your headache? And he says, well, the dust from the lotus feet of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, that's the only thing that will cure my headache. If I take their dust on my head, their feet dust on my head, that will cure it. And was it Uddhava who was conversing with Krishna on this? Narad. So he went to ask different devotees, and other devotees were like, oh no, I can't do that, I'll go to hell if I do that. And then he went to gopis of Vrindavan, and I'm not sure if there was other inhabitants or just the gopis. And then immediately they started gathering up so much dust. And Narada says, aren't you afraid that you go to hell for putting your dust on Krishna's head? He's like, we don't care as long as Krishna's headache's cured. So Krishna did this to demonstrate to Narada Muni, if I remember rightly backtracking, it was actually to curb Narada's pride that he was thinking he was the greatest devotee. And then it later came, he's seen how much devotion the inhabitants in Vrindavan had, that they weren't considering their suffering important at all if it meant that Krishna was happy. And of course, this was simply Krishna's demonstration, and the gopis didn't go to hell. But they're prepared to do that. So of course, this is a very, very high standard of devotion service. We're not asking the devotees to go to hell for Krishna's pleasure. Sometimes we're already doing that. We're going into some of these streets and shops and businesses, and this is like going to hell. And Prabhupada said that to the devotees. He was in London at the time. And one devotee asked, Prabhupada, do they preach Bhagavad Gita in hell? You know, in the hellish planets, do they preach Bhagavad Gita? And Prabhupada says, this London is not hell. And she asked the same question again and says, I'm saying, this London is not hell. So obviously she's thinking that Earth, planet, London, etc. is not a place of suffering. But Prabhupada, understanding what the true nature of the soul is and seeing that everybody's actually suffering now and doing things which are going to compound their suffering for the future. So therefore he's always compassionate. So therefore he was considering it was a hellish condition for the soul to be in the material world as a hellish condition, whether it's in the lower planet, higher planet, middle planet. Separation from Krishna is a hellish condition. This is how a devotee sees it. So, this Krishna conscious movement is so auspicious, and because Krishna is all auspicious, and if we make Krishna the center of attention, center of our activities, then the exploitative nature between friends, family, spouses, etc., then that can be surpassed, and simply allow ourselves to cooperate together to serve Krishna. So Prabhupada mentions, due to the cheating propensity, that both parties always remain envious. So because we simply, cheating means that we're trying to use someone else for our own pleasure. We're trying to get something out of somebody else. So this is a type of cheating. Whereas the awakened consciousness of a devotee is that we're not trying to cheat, we're trying to serve. And then rather than trying to exploit people, trying to cheat them, then we try to teach them. So we swap that ch and the t round from cheating to teaching. If we become good examples, then no longer are we out there being another one of God's competitors. Everyone's trying to compete with God by being the top person. And instead of becoming God, they're becoming more, instead of becoming godly, they're becoming dogly, becoming more doggy in our behavior. This is nature of Kali Yuga, that as time goes on, we become more and more degraded. So if we look at the things that our parents and our grandparents were doing, when they were kids getting up to mischief, it wasn't very serious, just like we were talking about the other day at the back to class. I think it was John and I were reminiscing that perhaps our parents, the worst thing they ever got up to was stealing an apple off a tree or something, climbing into the neighbour's garden, stealing an apple and then worrying about they're going to get caught. And then what happens is we grow up and the worst thing we do is like smoke cigarettes behind the school shed or something like that, or underage drinking. And now in schools, drugs is prominent to the point where even some kids are bullied into taking drugs. If you don't take drugs, then practically life is miserable at school. And this is a fact. Some of our friends have taken their kids out of school and decided to do homeschooling because the pressure of the kids to get into drugs. And then, so what will it be next generation if that's what the youngsters are today are doing when they become parents? What will their kids be doing, and so on and so on? Therefore, Kali Yuga becomes more degraded. But the one great hope in Kali Yuga is this Harinam Sankirtan, where all differences can be resolved when we work for that common goal of spreading Krishna consciousness, giving everyone the spiritual values in life which they really need to be satisfied. So in this way, then people can live peacefully and happily, and there's no question, there's no need for separation, there's no need for divorce or envy or exploitation. Anyone get any questions or comments? Iskon Guruvinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Gaur Bhaktavrinda ki.